We're going to talk about why film marketing, film funding, and film profit are all highly correlated, and why a filmmaker producing a project these days, particularly a film with a budget over $1 million, absolutely has to think about those three things in context during development, before production, in a way that they didn't have to do if they were producing films 10 years ago. The market's entirely changed. The way we sell films and who buys them and how they buy them has changed radically. And that means marketing is now part of a producer's job. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a quick chance to introduce themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Ray. Do you want to talk for a few minutes or for a minute or so about your background and your company?
Sure. My name is Ray Ellingsen. I'm a partner at Moving Pictures Media Group. We are a full service film production company, as well as a development services company. We've been around since 2009, and we provide a lot of production services, development services, things for clients. We also do our own films as well. But that's pretty much the wrap up of what we do in a nutshell.
You make it sound so easy. Anyway, with that in mind, Ash, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Oh, sure. I'm Ash Grayson. My company is Ribbow Media Group. I'm an entertainment entrepreneur, which means I make money marketing movies and lose money investing in entertainment. I have worked in marketing over 130 movies in the last 12 years, including over 100 theatricals.
Wow, very cool. Grace, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Hi there, I'm Grace Michaeliski. I'm the project manager at Moving Pictures Media Group. I work with everyone that's here on Zoom right now, bringing the team together and moving projects along through our development process.
That's very cool. And Renee, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about your work as a producer's rep?
Sure. I have been distributing films, buying, selling films for many years. I help new films trying to figure what the market they have to target, what is the budget, where the budget has to be, and help them and tell them, I wouldn't spend so much, or you need to spend more, and help them get that distribution agreement.
Very cool.
As part of the package to get the financing.
Right. So it's not just getting distribution, it's actually getting the kind of distribution that translates into minimum guarantees that investors can rely on in order to recoup their investment.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. The first thing that I want to talk about is in years past, in decades past, when a filmmaker had in their budget a line item that said they wanted to spend money on marketing, it was one of the first things that investors would cross out, or that people would cross out, and they'll say, no investor will ever put money into marketing a film. But those days are past. If you're a person producing a film, you have to start with your marketing even before in the development process for a wide variety of reasons. Do you want to talk for a few minutes, Ash, about why things have changed so much, and also what kind of marketing you usually engage in, or marketing processes you engage in when you're putting together a marketing plan for a project with a producer in the development stage?
Yeah. So Nancy, you're absolutely right. It used to be a completely different pool of money, even back when I started in 2012, right? In 2012, which is just 13 years ago, there was almost zero overlap in the equity. So the money to pay for the production and the marketing. It's still called P&A. Marie and I were just talking about it, prints and advertising. And I did work on some movies back in the day with the Weinsteins that had considerable newspaper budgets, even in 2013. But that has changed fairly dramatically, especially for independent films. Why? Because if you make a $5 million independent movie, you used to have to spend $20 and $30 million to market it, right? Now you've got a $5 million movie and you might be able to spend $5 million. And if you're the 5 million equity investors, the marketing money, the P&A guys usually get first out money. So that means if that movie makes 10 million and you collect 6 million, then all that money goes to the P&A guys, not to equity people. So more and more what we're seeing is people taking the entire chunk, right? The risky tranche, because the advertising tranche of marketing is incredibly boring and incredibly low risk for most things. Every dick in the world now has an asterisk since COVID. If there's a global pandemic and we can't be in theaters. And I actually, believe it or not, worked on a movie the day it was declared a global pandemic. So I had a movie that released that day. Good times. Movie still did $9 million that weekend. Very proud of that. But it's changed dramatically. And that's the reason it's changed. 2 reasons. The equity people are realizing that they invested in the most risky piece. And these boring bankers were the ones making not big, sexy money, but 15 to 25%. And they're usually making it in a matter of months versus the years. I worked on Hacksaw Ridge, and from the time that was the first script I saw called The Conscientious Objector till the time it showed in theaters, the first time was 10 years. So those equity people had 10 years of money invested before anything flowed back. So it's changed dramatically. The other thing that's changed dramatically is marketing with the advent of digital has actually become much cheaper and more efficient. And you'll see Neon or a company like that, even on their Academy Award winner, they saw it was working and they took their $8 or $9 million marketing budget for their $6 million movie, and it went up to 18 million. I know in the trades it says they spent 18 million on an Oscar marketing campaign. That's not accurate. They spent 18 million total, including all of the prints and the installations and the Oscar marketing and everything else. But that's been the big change, is the equity people are now realizing the bankers were the ones making all the money. So they've started to invest in the marketing as well.
That's cool. And so when I'm going to go to Renee for just to ask him the same question, why it's important for him that a project that he's taking to distributors have an actual advertising budget. But then I'm going to bounce back to you and ask what kind of planning or what do you do in the early stages in development to help filmmakers spend promotional dollars. Renee, do you want to talk for a few minutes about why it's critical for people to have marketing in their and advertising in their budgets, and to actually start doing that before the film is while the film is still in development, as opposed to waiting until the film is finished?
Sure.
No, so I want to wait. So that Renee, go ahead.
Yes. In the indie environment, where we don't have a Julia Roberts or Tom Hanks cast, we need to make sure that the broadcasters, the platforms, the cinemas know about it, because if not, the movie might just stay in a closet and in a hard drive, and it's going to take longer. So it's always we always prefer to have an allocated amount for, depending on the film festivals, or social media. You need money for a campaign, because if not, you might be there hanging a year, 2 years trying to find an investor to help you do it. So I would always suggest, and part of the development is who is going to be the user, the end user of the film. Is it going to go straight to a streamer, or is going to go to the theaters? So the marketing is going to be, the marketing dollars are going to be different, but you need to know it. You need to have it. And probably for the financier is also important to know and to put that money, because if not, he's going to take longer to recoup his investment.
Very cool. So when people are putting together a project and they're in the development stage and they come to you, Ash, perhaps because you get brought in by Ray as he's helping people build their build their budgets and their shooting schedules and all of the things that they need in order to get funding. What is it you add to the package, or what do you create? Do you create the poster? Do you create the initial social media accounts? What kinds of things do you do?
Oh, Ash, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm unmuted. I have a barking dog. The neighbor's dog was barking. I've done all of that stuff in the past, but what I do now that I find the most valuable is some deep analysis. We've also got Jeffrey who does it in a more kind of legacy data way. But what I do is I look at in development, look at the genre, look at the history of what it's done. And remember, you can be making a shark movie and say, hey, this is like Jaws. Everyone loves Jaws. But you can't target people who love Jaws easily because that's an old movie, right? So what we do is just take a very deep dive all the way down. I've got some really new stuff I've just started in the last few months, all the way down to what are your potential actors, genre returns. There's a lot of stuff that I look at now in marketing of, can this movie be at Christmas? Because literally every year someone will stroke you a $10,000 to $25,000 check for exclusivity for a few weeks or a month around Christmas, right? So I have a much more Moneyball approach to the marketing when it comes to the development stage. I think it's best to have a movie that has a genre, have a movie that has multiple, or movie or TV show that has multiple ways to recoup. My favorite examples recently, there was a movie made for $800 called Milk and Cereal, I think, on YouTube. And that movie, it's probably going to generate over $1 million of ad revenue, which is, everybody made money and whatever. But those guys have now got professional representation. I don't know. I bet Jason Blum's knocking on the door. Another example would be of something in development where they went ahead and just made a pilot and put it out there on YouTube for free. There's a show called The Promised Land. The high concept is The Chosen meets The Office, if you can believe it. If you've heard either one of those, it don't seem like a mashup you would think of. They put it out. It got 1.2 million views organically. So their marketing was all essentially a family and friends round of marketing. Hey, everybody, look at this thing we did. Hey, a few of the actors that have followings, tweet and exit, whatever you say. I don't know what you say now. You tell your followers about it. And I think I don't know if it's public information, but it is private on here now. They got an entire season funded of that. And it's a significant, close to 8-figure investment just because they put something on YouTube. So that's what I do in development, is look at what's viable. Is there something we can pull off that'll show product market fit? Because a lot of the money in this space now are people who come from technology. And then technology, they look for product market fit. Will anyone like this movie? And they also look at minimum viable product, which is really hard in movie business because that would be a trailer. Eesh.
That's really
Trailer. Can you make something to put out there? That's what I'm currently focusing on in development. Is about a 70 to 80 page analysis of a script with kind of deep ties into marketing, all the way down to people like movies where people dress like this.
That is really cool.
If I may insert something.
Yeah, go ahead, please do.
So one of the things we use Film Profit, which is an analytics firm, to do is, as Ash pointed out earlier, a more legacy look into analytics. We use Ash Grayson's company, Ribbow Media, with clients, and the offset is you want analytics for the finance people, you want a social media campaign, marketing campaign for the distributors and for your financiers. And that's all well and good. And yes, that is a big, huge reason why in development, I introduce my clients to Ash and introduce them to Film Profit and bring on people like Renee for distribution. But really, if you think about it, what Ash generates, what Film Profit generates as a filmmaker, it's a methodology of deployment into the marketplace. It's a game plan or a blueprint for how me as a producer I'm going to take this film out and make it profitable. And I think a lot of filmmakers overlook that. And it's something that, like, oh, I don't need analytics. I don't need a digital audience analysis. Well, you do if you're going to be a business person and actually do your job as a producer and figure out exactly how you're going to get out from under this and get out alive financially.
Especially if you're taking money from investors. One, you won't get the money, and if you do get the money, you'll end up with mad investors because they'll be like, "What the hell? Why did I give you that?"
You're responsible.
Yeah, that's what happens when you take people's money. Right? The other thing I was going to ask, Ash, is that a lot of people, it's possible to raise money for films using Regulation CF. You can raise money from investors. So you put together the whole film package, so you know that you're going to have business, you get the distribution, and then when you have to go raise $1 million or $2 million, you might go on to one of the Regulation CF platforms and post it so investors can find it. You may have investors who want to put money in, and so they start the ball rolling, and then you get more and more small investors who are spending 100 or 500 or whatever. Do you work with people to create those kinds of crowdfunding campaigns, since usually they are promoted through social media channels?
Yeah. So I've actually myself co-founded 2 companies that raised almost all the money in a Reg CF. I've exited one, sold my shares back to the crowd, and the other is an animation company called Pencilish.
Mm.
I think I do help people do that. I think what I've learned in that space is it's better to pitch Disney World than the ride Pirates of the Caribbean. So you're better off to pitch, I'm building a cinematic universe, whether it's small or whatever. If you look at the first guys to do it, Legion M, they were like, we're going to make superhero movies with the people. They weren't like, we're going to make this little movie. That's the easiest way to get there. That said, you can partner with those people. Part of the reason I was successful, just to be fully transparent, on both of my crowd investments that did the max Reg CF raise, which has now been raised $5 million, by the way, was the Legion M guys I used to email them like, hey, can I see your Facebook account? Can I see? Sure, here you go. Here's how we did it. Here's what our structure is. It's almost like a big club that makes movies, right? That it's more about lifestyle than return on investment. Most people aren't pragmatic investors. They want to get into the Legion M Comic-Con party, right? But in my case, I did make a little movie with the first company that I've exited called Camp Hideout, that we made it with crowd funds. Moneyballed the release. Moneyballed the making of the movie, right? Put Christopher Lloyd in it just for 4 or 5 days. Camp movies, been in some camp movies. Put Corbin Bleu in it, who was about to be in the reboot of High School Musical. So, and we had the crowd behind us, right? Spent a little bit of money, got to 1.1 million US box office, and it triggered about 4 million of worldwide output, which everybody made their money back, which was great. But that was in no small part because there was a crowd behind that movie.
So having a crowd is pretty important for crowdfunding, and being able to get yourself to that crowd.
Yeah, if you look what the Angel guys have done over the years too, right? They have built in a vertical like this. We're only making pretty conservative faith things. And it started with His Only Son, which was a $250,000 movie that did about 13 million in the box office off about $1.5 million of P&A. And then after that, Sound of Freedom happened, and that was huge for them. They did spend money, but they spent about $50 million marketing that. But they reinvested in success after it did well. I think that got over 180 million, but that was built on the crowd, right? That's why people say, hey, I don't want to just preach to the choir, whoever the choir is. It doesn't have to be religious. I'm like, you better.
You are preaching to the choir.
Yeah, Ray and I've had this conversation for years. The reason the comic book movies work is because it's probably hard to imagine that I'm a nerd, but yeah, when I was a comic book nerd and I would walk into the comic shop Wednesday nights or whatever it was, when they'd open the boxes, it was a cross section of humanity, right? Janitors, doctors, every once in a while, a couple girls, but a cross section of humanity, right? And that's why those movies work, because there was this choir, right? Men in Black didn't sell a ton of comics. Iron Man didn't sell a ton of comics. But what it did sell to is this cross section that kind of was a perfect test audience for, does this have scale? So it's the same thing for every movie.
That is very cool. Which actually brings us to our next point. When you talk about a comic book, the cool thing about a comic book is it's all complete. It's a complete vision of something. You know what the characters look like, you know what the dialogue is, you know what the personalities are, and that gives you the target market. So when you're working with a filmmaker who is in the development stage, so they're at the point where they've got a screenplay that they may have to tweak because they'll have to get notes on it from somebody who knows what's going to actually sell and what people will fund. Then at some point they have to figure out who their actors are going to be. They have to figure out what the film's going to look like from a sort of visual standpoint, which sometimes includes coming up with a poster, coming up with, depends on how deep, it depends on what the world is that you're describing. If it's one thing if it's an everyday world thing, but if you're doing something that's science fiction related, fantasy related, historically, you have to talk about what costumes are going to look like and so forth. At that, when people are working on that kind of content, do you help guide their choices in terms of what they create? Like you say, you make it look like this.
Yes.
This one tests better. That one doesn't test as well.
Yeah. So very much. And I think that is what I like getting into more now. I'm not an artist, but I support artists. And my feedback is always from the audience's perspective. I say you have pathological empathy for the audience. I don't know if anyone's been on a meeting with Amazon, but even in their Zoom meetings, there literally is an empty chair that's supposed to represent their customer, right? It's always weird to see people referring to the empty chair, you're on the, but that's the way I look at it. So I don't say I don't like this. What I say is to equate it to something like to cooking, right? It's just so you know, 23% of people don't like mayonnaise. So something to think about. But I do that always. I think Disney's dealing with that, with trying to remake things. How do you remake it and make it modern, but still have the people who originally loved it? And I think they've obviously missed the step a few times on that. But it's like that with any movie. It's what time period are you going to put this in? That matters. Does anybody want to think about what Stranger Things looks like set in the 2000s? It's far less interesting, right? You've literally missed a generation at that point.
Right.
The older people that like it, I guess I'm the old people like it, or like the nostalgia would be gone, right?
Mhm.
So all of those things are important. I want to let an artist be an artist, because if you don't, then you never get Wes Anderson. And I was on a set with him once, and the exhausting level of that he put into what the color of the books in the out of focus background were, right? But also that's what makes his movies and his style. He would have, if I would have gone through the script for Memento as a and said, hey, artistically, you can't go backwards, you'll lose the audience. I'll just been, hey, you know what? There's some people who are going to love this. What I try to do when I analyze it from an audience perspective is make sure that the people who should love it are going to love it.
Do you ever do like test campaigns where you take different posters out, or so that You test
Yes.
pictures against each other, or test trailers against each other, or test.
Yeah, or test concepts. Again, I love talking about specific examples, and sometimes people get upset about it, but there was a movie called The Identical
Mhm.
that I worked on. And the original script written by a guy named Howie Klausner, who did Space Cowboys. Amazing, right? The high concept is, what if Elvis, he had the twin brother that died at birth, but what if that twin brother had survived, been adopted by a different family, but still was drawn to that world and ended up becoming an Elvis impersonator, right? Struggling with his identity, raised by a pastor or whatever. Great. That's a great concept. Elvis Dave was like, nah, pass.
Yeah, and
So for me, it's okay, you don't have a movie anymore. It's like Saving the Silverman, Neil Diamond's out. You don't have a movie. But they went ahead and made the movie. And I'm like, guys, I'm really worried because the main hook for this movie is this Elvis-like figure who's not Elvis. But everyone knows the story of Elvis. So I went off and did a test campaign of targeted literally just to people who love Elvis Presley. And they hated it.
Did?
They hated it, like passionately, not like apathetically, not like,
So they're
"Well,
feeling
no one really said anything," or I got a lot of loud no's. It was just like a bunch of just, I can't wait to know where this is playing so I can boycott it. Oh, geez.
I'm gonna get sick.
They
I'm gonna take a sign.
hate it. And then I tried a few other audiences with some other angles and couldn't find anybody. And I returned 90% of my marketing money, took a job as a consultant that was like, I've had a lot of cancer and illness in my family. So it was like being a hospice nurse for a movie. Make the producer comfortable, doing some warm socks.
It's
It
gonna
was
be
just,
bad. It's as bad as it can
and,
be.
and there was 80, I believe there's 86 people in the marketing call. They did like Zaxby's integrations, but when Zaxby's was like Raising Cane's. But yeah, that's why you have to test stuff. And every once in a while, I did a movie this last year was pretty successful. Indie movie called Unsung Hero. Trailer went out, did well. Then the director was like, "Oh, got an even better trailer." And it was more artistic whenever, and didn't do near as well
Yeah, I can see.
with the broad crowd. Now, touched a few other people, so we ran with it some, but we didn't move our campaign into pushing all the new trailer. But we do so much testing now because we can use some artificial intelligence, not to replace creatives. I say I use artificial intelligence to replace nail guns when I'm an architect. So
Yeah.
that's what it does, right? So on that movie, it was a story of a band, right? A true story of a band. And if you're a fan of a band, you're used to them coming to your city. So we actually used AI to create custom posters for every single city.
Which actually totally makes sense, actually.
Yeah. And so we ran over 100,000 dad variants on that one.
That makes sense.
And it's all not just testing, real-time testing, changing, moving, not the Kevin Get screen engine. Those are very expensive, dynamic, very scientific tests, right? Mine are more like, here's how the market's moving.
It's trend detection. So
Trending and day trading, all that stuff.
day trading, same thing. Renee, does it help you if a producer in the development stage, or in early, or in pre-production, or in production before the film is released, does this kind of work, or this kind of marketing and market analysis? Does it help you sell the film? Are the metrics that they collect or useful when you're trying to convince distributors to come on board?
Definitely. You need that. They might pass because that's not their market, or you can target the correct sales agent when you know the market you're going to. You don't want the food to fail. You need a good distribution. So that will help choose who to go to.
I could be wrong, and maybe Ray, who's had a lot of experience working with new producers, can tell me if I am. But it's my perception that many people that are producing a film, particularly their first film, where they produced a bunch of small films, but they've never really graduated to the level where they want to take some other people's money and turn it into something that's going to generate bigger revenue. Their perception of what a distributor does seems inherently flawed. They don't realize that distributors are people that have a market in hand. That I'm ABC. I know the ABC, the television channel back in the old days. I know who my target market is. Or I am a European company who is French, Italian, Spanish, Norway. I know who my target market is. So I have those people in my hand. So I'm waiting to find projects that I'm going to feed to these people I already know. A distributor's not going out looking for new people generally. He has people and he wants to buy product for those people. Am I correct in that understanding, Renee?
Totally. You have distributor sales agents that are experienced in big films, festival films that have won Oscars or in Venice or Cannes. And there are other distributors that sell very well independent films because they have their market, they have their Rolodex, their customers for that. And not every sales agent will be able to sell everything.
Right.
Not everything, any film. You
Right.
gotta be focused.
So it's important if Ash can actually say, we've done market testing. We know even before launch who this film is going to be for. So if he can provide that information to you and there's statistics and metrics that he can use to prove that's the case, it's easier for you, Renee, to be able to go and actually go to the people who has that market and says, this is the film for those people. And you want to be the one that gets it, because if not, it's going to be one of your competitors.
You don't want the film to fail and recoup and return profits.
Mm-hmm.
Because the clients that this sales agent has perhaps are not interested in independent films. So the film will stay there, will move, will be in a catalog for 1 year, and then will it go to the end of the catalog and it'll stay there and never return money.
Right. Which is pretty much dead for the filmmaker and a bad investment for the investor.
It's for everybody, yeah.
You've just hit on something, Nancy, that to address, which is,
Please do.
you said most people have a misconception of what distributors do. And a lot of filmmakers that I deal with have no idea exactly how distributors work. And I want to make a distinction really quick. Distributors pretty much stay in their lane, and Renee can attest to that. I deal with this, I'm looking, you call up Blumhouse and they're like, yeah, we're not interested. Actually, they are getting into comedy, but we're interested in things that are in our lane. And so when you use let me make a distinction between distributors, sales agents, and producers representatives. My experience, a sales agent has a line to a distributor, or a line to certain people. That's his go-to. He doesn't usually aim outside the lines. He stays pretty much in his lane. And when you get your film done, you go to him, he takes a big percentage, he'll knock down the door of the people he knows, and he'll call it a day. A producer's rep, by contrast, will come in while you're in development, and they'll help you, and they'll work with people like Ash and people like Jeff Hardy at Film Profit, and they'll work with the people doing the budget and schedule, and they will figure out a methodology based on all that information. And they'll say, okay, I'm not just going to stay in my lane and go here. I'm going to take it here for foreign. I'm going to take it here for streaming. I'm going to take it here for a limited theatrical release. So they'll maximize your sales across the board, so that when you take a film out, he's not just going, I'll just take it over to Hulu and call it a day, which is what a lot of sales agents in my past experience have done. That's why I work exclusively with producers reps like Renee Lita, because they will work with you, and they're just as motivated as you are. to get the film into the right hands and get it to the right distribution model.
I think you mentioned to me one time that, was it you? I think somebody said to me, the worst thing is you may go to a particular agent. Anyway, you go to somebody to sell your film, you give it to them, and they say, yeah. And people are so happy to get distribution because somebody signs on the line, says, yes, I'll be your distributor, even if they're not getting cash. It's crazy. And then the point is that what that guy does is literally just bundle it with 100 films or 1,000 films and then sells the whole mess of films that are, because it's basically content by the pound, right? They're basically just sell it to a big aggregator. And so it never really got a chance to be,
Yeah.
nobody's negotiating for that film.
Yeah, it does. People have done that in the past. I think people are getting smarter because social media, because of a lot of information that's out there. And I think one of the things that is going to stop a lot of people from just sending it to a bundler is, hopefully, is that when they take that letter from a distributor that says, hey, when you're done, give us your film, the bank goes, man, this is not good to me. So they want to see minimum sales guarantees. They want to see pre-sales in the foreign market. They want to see some kind of commitment from a sales agency or a distributor that says, hey, look, you deliver this film and we'll go ahead and ensure that you receive X number of dollars or whatever the contract states in return. Banks aren't stupid. They're not going to look at a letter of, oh, hey, when you're done, send this over here and they'll take a look at it. That's you need a collateral instrument for any financer, whether it's private equity, whether you're doing a deficit financing deal with somebody like Amazon or Hulu, or whether you're doing traditional debt financing. They are going to require a collateral instrument, and that collateral instrument by far is your distribution sales agreement. So it's got to be very strong. That's why you're bringing on somebody like Renee, because he's not just going to take it and bundle it with something else. He's going to know, okay, for this market. In fact, Renee's told me, this film I'm taking to South America to sell this territory. And then when we're done with that, we're going to go to E1 Entertainment in Canada. Then he'll take it all over the world and maximize sales. And then he'll set it up for, okay, in the first quarter, we're going to do a limited theatrical release. In the second quarter, we're delivering it to a streaming service. In the third quarter, we'll get it broadcast at E1 and South American chef. So he'll maximize your potential for sales. And that's why I highly recommend to people that are like, oh, I don't need analytics. I do. Oh, I don't need a producer's rep.
Well, I think it really depends on the kind of budget. If when somebody's making like a micro budget feature, they don't need that stuff because they're not spending enough. They're not going to benefit. But if you're spending over $1 million, especially if you're sending 2 or 3 or 5, you are going to need it, because how are you going to get the money if you don't have it? If you don't have, and on the other hand, you can make one film and never make another because you're the guy that produced that film that never made no money. What am I going to give you more money for?
I think that his name is Ed Wood.
Oh, but he was passionate, and I think that makes up for a lot. The
bank didn't agree with him, but that's okay.
But who do we remember? Ash, you just mentioned briefly that you you help people think about talent. So when you're analyzing a film and you're working with Jeffrey Hardy, who does film analytics, and you're working with Renee, and you're trying to figure out, use the barometer or the social media and advertising channels to figure out who the target market is. Does that occasionally lead you to make suggestions for casting that may be less expensive or may bring significantly more power when it comes to social media advertising? Because the talent, maybe because the talent happens to have a huge following themselves personally, or because people generally like that person. What is it? Betty White got to be really popular at the end of her life.
Yeah.
Everybody liked that girl.
Yeah. Very much. So the first thing that's important is not just the talent.
Mm-hmm.
Is that talent playing in a role that the audience is used to them seeing, right? And that they like. Prime example, Tom Hanks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tom Hanks got cast in The Circle, right, with Emma Watson as a bad guy.
Mhm.
And the audience was like, what? Oh, the guy from Bosom Buddies in Philadelphia? No, like, we don't want him being a bad with because he had just gotten off of his run of Saving Private Ryan, saving space, and the work. Like, they didn't want to see him in that movie. And that movie, is one of my biggest flexes ever for like Deadline or something. Because I was like, yeah, it's gonna lose to Bahubali 2, which was an Indian movie that was getting released on 400 and something screens. And it did. It beat the Tom Hanks movie. But normally when I speak into cast, it does have to do with, there's a little bit of the Moneyball piece of it, which, or what is this person worth foreign, right?
Yeah.
That's putting Christopher Lloyd in a movie for me was strategic. And we did it in a way that was very Moneyball, where we paid him a SAG minimum plus a bonus for consulting on how to make a camp movie. We meant to pay all this extra insurance and stuff. But cast matters, and it's not always just how expensive they are. Like, there is a script I love, and we're just trying to find the right male lead for it. And I want Channing Tatum, because if we get him in this role, then it makes it a movie that could probably do 50, 60, 70, $80 million. That's not always the case. What's the Kevin Hart, Bryan Cranston movie from a few years ago? What was the name of that movie? It was a French movie that got remade. But I remember seeing it going, cast doesn't always draw, but this movie's going to do $100 million because it's those two together. And it was a very heartwarming, well done dramedy. But you can't always just throw cast in there and it work and do something, right?
Right. It has to be, it has to match. It has the social media is how people find out about films. So if there's a mismatch between the
Yep, and you can
cast
have
and
plenty of social media. The Lionsgate movie with Kevin Hart, they tried to make the video game movie. We had a gigantic social media universe, right? But are their followers seeing them do the thing they like to see them do? This is why I'm not going to say the movie, but there was a guy that in Hollywood had a movie out. He paid a Kardashian $1 million to post about the movie. And I'm like, no one cares what they're watching. Because they don't have that kind of influence. Now, if it was makeup, if it was fashion, something like that, something that had a lifetime value of a customer, where you could even a drink, where you could convert them over. But for a movie, like a picture of a Kardashian in a bikini on a yacht saying, OMG, this movie's so good. And that probably doesn't help you. I actually love Justin Bieber, but I had a friend who's making a movie and said, what if we got Justin Bieber in it? And I'm like, in a religious movie about in the 1940s? No, that doesn't really work. It's like, who wouldn't want Taylor Swift in their movie, right? But the movie The Giver, when she was in that, it was a massive draw down on the movie, not up. People who love The Giver are like, why is Taylor Swift? So it's not as simple as insert star, insert social media. We've seen it over and over with the people who take YouTubers and put them in movies. Hey, we're going to give Jimmy Donald, Mr. Beast, the voice of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. People want to watch him give away stuff on YouTube. Like, they don't care. So as long as it's aligned, it has to be aligned. Yeah, it has to be aligned. If you're, I was teasing somebody the other day, and I'm like, we're all our own version of Gilligan, right? It's like, we got the thing we're good at and everybody knows us for. And when we get out of our lane, it's like, why is Gilligan over here? Gilligan could be on Dancing with the Stars. Bob Denver could. So there's other outlets, but
There's other outlet can be done.
yeah.
When, as you're coming down to the list, the end of the list of questions, when somebody actually has their film done or they're nearing the end, do you come back and work with them? So you'd work with them in pre-production, like you work with them throughout development, pre-production, and post-production all the way through it. Are you having a presence? If you know a film's going forward and it's got a budget, are you working all the way along so that by the time the film comes out, the water is very warm? Or is it the case that you start in, you do stuff in development and then you come back when the film is finished and start doing the PR and social media marketing and those campaigns?
It's a little bit of everything. An example of a movie where I was cradle to the grave or beginning to end would be I Can Only Imagine.
Mhm.
Got sent a script that needed to be redone. Got in, worked with him, helped with developing the story from a marketing perspective, and I'm not a writer. Got the first cut of the movie, which is an absolute unwatchable disaster. And there's a whole team of people too, right? Helping them rework it. We had a director who very passionate about connecting to the audience more than his art being exactly his vision. He's a performer. He's people reacting and singing my song back to me or whatever. And then crafted that campaign all the way through opening weekend. That was Time as Roadside Attractions' biggest movie at the time. That was multi-year. Other times I got a little movie out this week, Friday, which a big team of marketers and I came in at the end to help from a data perspective and help them potentially expand from 800 screens to 1,200 screens. And those are fun, but it's really unfair that I get to put that on my IMDb when it's like I rode in a golf cart next to them. And, hey guys, we crossed the finish line of the marathon. Let's all run across together. But I've also been the guy at the starting line behind all of the real photographers, trudging up the indie release, which is way more. But I actually did a marathon once because of a friend that were doing it. And I didn't realize they put all the slow people like way in the back. And I'm like, I have an extra mile to run. They should put the fast people back here. But that's the way it is making an indie movie and marketing, right? You're put behind all the, so this little movie I'm doing Friday, I came in at the end and it's great because they're the only new release that's not R-rated, which means
What's the new film?
it's called The Last Supper. It's
Last
a faith-based small movie. And what's great is TV reserves a lot of spots, right? TV and connected TV, Hulu, we all refer to the same thing. Reserves a lot of television spots for movies. R-rated movies can't run their spots before 9 o'clock local.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me the 7 to 9 with really cheap. So the R-rated movies are paying 3 and 4 and 5 times what I'm advertised. And obviously I'm going for a targeted audience, but that gets into the nerdy stuff. But to answer the original question, yeah, I get involved.
So you have different, sounds like you have different things. Sometimes
Yes.
we don't call it cradle to grave because that's not a happy thought, but beginnings to. And sometimes you just do. Cool. The very last question. This is something that I hope Ray and you and Renee, it might be appropriate, but definitely you two will talk about. There's a lot of different monetization strategies for media these days. One way is to get paid for showing the film. The other way, Disney makes most of its money on merchandising. In fact, I don't think they care if anybody goes to a film. They just want the word Snow White circulating a lot because then people will go buy more Snow White toys.
Yeah.
So do you help people with monetization strategies beyond just monetizing the film, like licensing or merchandising, or like producing books, producing other products that they can generate revenue from, in addition to just the revenues that come from the media? And I guess, Ray, did you want to talk about that? And then we'll ask.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Either way, for us, when we're developing with a client, we look at the analytics data, we look at who our audience is, and we see if there's ancillary revenue sources that are available. Our sister company is Platinum Universe, which is the third largest comic book IP library in the world. We did things like Men in Black, Cowboys and Aliens, Nightman. And so when we're thinking of projects that come to us, some of those projects are appropriate for building a graphic novel based on the movie, or vice versa, movie based on a graphic novel. But we have that component in there, and not because you're going to sell comic books, because selling comic books is like owning a newsstand. There's no profit in it. But what there is a profit in is, I read some analytics data from Film Profit, and last year's San Diego Comic-Con was attended by 151,000 actual humans and 6.8 million virtual followers.
Mhm.
You're doing these kind of things in development, creating ancillary revenue, creating books, creating graphic novels, because it builds an audience vector that you can't beg, borrow, or steal anywhere else. And then you give that information to somebody like Ash and you go, hey, Ash, we made a comic book based on this too. What does that get us? And he says, well, it gets us into a different social media venue here as well. And so we also look at merchandising and licensing, which is something that Platinum, our sister company, does. We don't necessarily with filmmakers go, hey, we're going to make an action figure of your lead character here. We do look at other mediums. We do look at spin-offs, prequels, and sequels, but mostly we're looking for getting the film financed and getting it to market based on the methodology of deployment that was brought up, that was created by not only our producers rep and distributor, but by Ash with social media and by Film Profit with the analytics data. So yes, we're always looking for other revenue sources, but we want to focus on the key component, which is making that film, and then building things around it that are appropriate if that builds an audience.
That sounds so it's good to know that you actually look at different ways to monetize projects, because I think there are a lot of ways. And I think you're right. The right product can actually get you into a market you would otherwise not be visible to. We have a number of questions. So if you have questions that you want to ask, go ahead. You can ask them in chat, or you can, and it will go directly to the panelists, and they'll also be in Q&A. So the first thing is Silworth the Wall says, hi, thank you for the session. I'm based in Sweden, but work with creative teams in Thailand to make horror dramas. My question is, if your guests have worked with producers in Asia to help them fund their projects, especially when the main market is in Asia as well, but they're looking to break into the West and into Europe going forward. So have you guys worked with people not just in the US, but producers that are located in other countries as well?
Are you going to use that question, Dirk?
I think it could be for anybody, but you go ahead and answer, and then we'll ask Ash and we'll ask Renee.
Sure. From our standpoint, we actually did have a project here a few months ago, this last year, that they wanted to shoot in Thailand and they want to do all this stuff. They want to develop it here and shoot over there. And the problem is, when you're talking about independent film, the country you're shooting in, and they're getting all these wonderful tax credits and all these other things for shooting in Romania or Thailand or wherever, the UK, most of your financing is going to have to come out of that country. You can't go to somebody like the SBA, Small Business Administration here, or any of the finance institutions or banks in the United States and go, hey, I'm making a movie overseas. They don't care. The whole mandate of the SBA is to promote and encourage business and economic growth in America. So it becomes a little bit, we actually have a project in the UK right now, and we're helping them secure UK financing through the distribution model. So we have done that. Yes, we've worked with other countries, but I think you need to know right away, if you're shooting something in Thailand, most of your finance is probably going to come out of Thailand. Your tax incentives are going to come out of Thailand, which are going to benefit those investors or that investment source. So it becomes a little bit complicated. It can be done, but there's a lot of moving parts to it.
I think Eugene Mandelkorn, I believe he's located in Canada, and which has some pretty amazing benefits. And it is definitely the case that you can make films in Canada or projects in Canada for have extraordinary rebates. Have you worked with producers that are in Canada or projects that sort of cross the North American
Sure.
North American border?
Sure. We've had a company in Canada. If you look at, I think it's Toronto right now has a 45% tax rebate set up. But a lot of that is you have to have Canadian content in order to qualify. So it's a Canadian production. We can help set that up, but you're not going to be coming to a US finance source for a film in Canada necessarily. A lot of people go, oh, it's just going to be my location that I'm shooting. But to qualify for those tax credits again, the people who are financing that are going to be the ones taking advantage of that tax credit, and they're not going to be US investors who are going to be able to benefit from a Canadian tax credit.
I think also I mentioned in passing they have their version of Reg CF in Canada as well. So in theory, you could find there are investment forms there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are investment sources there. If you're looking at doing development in the US and I'm going to shoot in another country, development's development. You're still going to need to build an audience. You're still going to need to get analytics. You're going to need a budget and schedule that's bondable. So all those things are applicable to another country, but just be aware when you walk into it in the beginning that the end result of your financing is probably going to come out of the country that you're shooting.
But so the package that you create, the development package that you create is going to have to go to another country in order to find its funding. And
Most likely, yeah.
you just need to make sure you know what those investors want in addition to the ones that you
Right.
what their limitations are and so forth. So let's see. Robert asks, my film takes place mainly in a fraternity where there's a murder. Doesn't the genre of thriller and revenge killing mean that there doesn't need to be a star?
Yeah, often the genre is the star.
Mhm.
So there doesn't need to be a star. And it tends to be lower budget. I think if you're looking, what a great way to find somebody is look at who has a movie that's coming out that's a medium to big movie over the next couple of years and go grab them before they're famous. They made Teen Wolf before Michael J. Fox was famous, and they were just shelving that baby. Gonna just bury it to video, and then he got famous. Hey, I got an idea.
Look what I have in my hand now.
Yeah, so we did that with Corbin Blue. His star had faded a little bit, but we knew he was going to be on a reboot of High School Musical where he's going to play a teacher, and we knew he was going to go be on Broadway and play Seymour in a big shows. Yeah, look at who's an up and comer that has something coming out.
And I think the other thing is if you're not going to rely on cast for a genre type picture, you do need to absolutely cultivate an audience first, which is why somebody like Ribbow and Film Profit and having a distribution on board that agrees with your methodology. But you don't necessarily have to have a big A-list star for war, but again, and I think Ash and Renee, you can either fight me on this or agree with it. I think you need to cultivate an audience first and foremost, and that needs to be a heavy priority if you don't have the money put into getting an A-list star who may or may not be applicable to the film anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot of success in that space by having somebody that's mildly famous, right? That has 100,000 YouTube followers or whatever, or YouTube subscribers, and then having them do a casting call for a scene, right? Every little thing like that is marketing, right? If somebody posts, hey, we need 100 people to come out to this scene and get sprayed with a squirt gun full of blood, that's marketing. I know in some of our notes, we're going to talk about behind the scenes and whatever, but what I'm seeing now, some in the horror space and some in the indie space, is people going live on set every day, right? And people love behind the scenes of things that they love, but they don't love the behind the scenes of things that they don't love. Like, no one's watching the behind the scene of Star Wars till they loved it. However, if George Lucas could have gone live on Instagram and TikTok and whatever every day, by the end of filming that, he would have had 10 million people watching. And part of it is be willing to invite the audience into the experience that way. That's part of building. It's a lot harder to build a social following than it used to be. It's not, if you love horror movies, scroll. If you love cheesy movies or whatever that strategy was. Now, if you go live every day, and you're going to have one. Remember, Mr. Beast, that Jimmy, I've talked to Jimmy a lot. He made a video every day when he was like 13 or whatever that no one watched. Right? And you'll build over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the exception. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Renee, is that accurate? Does that have any kind of value to you when people start doing stuff like broadcasting from set?
Oh, definitely. It's all part, as Ash said, it's all part of the marketing. There's a company in Argentina that just did the crowdfunding, and they were able to get $2 million, and all these followers came to set, and they were very happy to be in the movie. Some of them were in the movie. They were very happy to be part of that. It's not just.
I was going to say, I got a call, I want to say a couple of years ago. I ended up on the phone with this guy, and he says, here's the issue. I've been going to your events and for a long time, and it's because I make films, and I make them in my weird little, in his hometown, which is like Nebraska or some weird place. And he says, the thing is, I don't know if I should come to Hollywood. And I go, tell me about your films. He goes, I've made 3 or 4 of them now, and everybody's really nice, and the whole town turns out to be part of them, and they always make money because the town wants to watch them, and they're zombie movies. Anyway, and like one time I had to shut down, in the middle of the night, I had to shut down Main Street, and they let me do it for free, and da-da-da. So basically, this guy's got all of this kind of a county that's supporting his work because he's their guy that makes the zombie movies, and they like being part of the film industry. And I said, I don't know why you should come to Hollywood. I just don't know. Seems like you got a crowd already. Maybe you could expand the crowd you got. But it's just, he was doing so well. He could make more. He could find, his thinking was maybe he should be producing here. And I just didn't see really a lot of value when he had basically, he never really had to pay anybody because extras would turn out for free.
Perhaps for the town is product placement, no?
Yeah, and
So
exactly.
they're very happy. The stores, the town stores are very happy about that.
And
I just posted it in the chat, but one of the ideas I've been throwing around to a couple people is, what if you just posted your dailies to YouTube every day?
Mm-hmm.
And then made it open and whatever. By the end, you could have built a community of, again, the largest crew ever put together of people who are going to edit your movie in different ways that you had never thought of.
Right.
You'll get stories out of it and whatever. I think we have, as artists, there's there's multiple kinds of artists, right? There's the ones who want to make their art in the dark and suffer. Then there's the artists that are performers that are about the response from others. And then there's true visionaries. There's a handful of those every generation, right? And they usually rise to the top when we see them. But for everyone else, I'm like, stop trying to be secret and spring and a twist ending and whatever. Man, there's nothing new under the sun, as they say, right? So I just say, put it all out there, right? I think you'll build an audience of, again, what if the only people you build are every aspiring editor? Guess what? There's 10,000 of those.
Yeah.
If they're going to go take your dailies every day, just like ideas like that are not real sexy, but that no one's doing, but that require a lot of work. And it's artistically risky because you're exposing yourself. Like someone can be like, oh my gosh, can't believe you spent 6 hours doing these 3 crummy setups or whatever. But stuff like that is where I love to see more independent people. It's like you can be prolific in what you create and that not have to be a whole new movie.
Yeah.
Right? You could post every angle from every scene every day, and all of a sudden you have got 3 years of content.
Not to mention, I really like the Twilight Zone, and they tell you can't make movies that are short stories, but I'm like, I could totally see the Twilight Zone series of things. And then you could, if you wanted to go into doing television or you wanted to go into doing movies, it's a great springboard because people know your voice.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go on to, so Per Hampton asks, at what stage in the festival process do we contact your services? I think he's talking to you, Ash. So do you want to put your website information so they can reach out to you if you do that, if you help that kind of thing?
I'm answering some chat questions too. So yeah, ribbowmediagroup.com, Ash at Ribbow Media Group. It all depends on my bandwidth, right? I tend to be very expensive or free. And I've just found it works best that way. So I spend a lot of time working for Hollywood and taking their money, but then I also spend a lot of time. Some of the stuff is productized and we work through MPMG, and it's really have a desire. At the end of the day, somebody who makes a little movie through us is going to end up being Spielberg. It's just what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And I want to be the guy that helped them along the way, right?
Mhm.
I've got 7 kids of my own. A couple of them like to make movies. Yeah, I've got 7 kids. Got to go through a few Tito's to get to a Michael. It's just the math. But yeah, reach out to me, and if I have bandwidth, I'll help you. One of the questions I had here that I wanted to make sure I told everybody was you preferred YouTube over Vimeo. So I know a lot of artists like Vimeo, more controls. I use Vimeo as the back end for some streaming services I work for. But when it comes to posting your stuff, YouTube all day long, every day, nothing else close. Number 1 search engine on earth is Google. They're losing market share to all of the GPTs and the AIs. But the number 2 search engine in the world is YouTube. Right?
Right.
That's how we have seen stars born. And I know an example of someone who posted a short to YouTube, had 300 views in 6 years. Someone put it on Reddit and went to 15 million views, and they went and got a movie deal. So how about that?
Yeah. That's my Google, man. They actually do on the world. Let's see. All right. So one more question. What range of budgets do you work with? You have talked about a wide range of films starting from as low as $800. Ray, when you're helping, your general focus or your focus is on helping people work on films that are, you don't usually take projects that are under $1 million, do you?
No, we've actually helped develop half a dozen films in the last few years that were $500,000 films. One was 800,000, one was, I think, 400,000. But once they got the analytics back, they found there was no market for it because the only way they could do it was, I think, Renee, we bet your ear on that. It was one of those, you'd be looking at advertising-based video on demand or AVOD, and you'd make about 30% of your 400,000 back, which is actually not a great financial model. I think we will deal with under $1 million, but I think that's a very special methodology of deployment, and you've got to adjust your development to that. We deal in the $1 to $12 million range pretty routinely. We've done a couple at 25 million. We're working on 25 million right now that we're developing for a client. But the 1 to 5 is the sweet spot because there's an exit strategy. And if you do it right, you can actually get your money back and you can get finance for that because there's a lot of options through like the SBA, through NorCal, through Lendistry that you can get full financing $1 to $5 million on your picture. So that's the lowest hanging fruit as far as finding financing at this point.
That's cool. One of the guests, Per Hampton, says, would any of the panel be interested in guesting on a SAG-AFTRA panel for indie funding for vets and entertainment on May 6th? He's on the LA BOD Military Committee, and we would love to have you. So I don't know if you guys want to be able to be able to reach out to him. I don't know. I think
you can email me. Every time, if it depends on if it's in person or virtual or whatever. Again,
Right.
yeah, I love to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And same with moving pictures. If he wants to reach out to us, I think Grace has our information up there on the screen, but we can put it in the chat as well.
I put it in the chat a couple times. You guys can just grab it there.
Reach out and we'll see what we can do and see what it's all about. And we're happy to support anybody.
And Renee, how do people meet you? How do they connect to you? Is there an email address they should contact you on?
I'll put my email.
All right, great.
Like
Through Grace, we can go.
Just contact Grace. If you contact Grace,
Right.
you'll be able to reach Renee. Let's see.
I'll make sure that we respond.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless you want to reach out via Crystal Ball, you can sometimes reach Renee as well.
That's really funny, actually.
Renee does smoke signals only.
Renee's, I don't even know why I'm talking to you right now about this thing. So I think we've covered all the information we plan to cover. Grace, I apologize for not letting you talk very much, but this is a good time. You go ahead and review what people need. If someone is a producer, they have a film that they think they might want to get development help on or film analytics for and all those kinds of things. Can you go ahead and let them know what your general process is for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, of course. So I did put our web address and my email in the chat. You can use whatever one you like. On our website, you can go in and upload your project information. If you feel that it's not at a place that you can submit it to us to look at, you can just email me directly and we can set up a Zoom or phone call. And so whatever you're comfortable with, I'll accommodate. Either way is fine with me.
And So most of the time you guys are working with producers. So it's not the case that people that come to you or people that are planning on producing their own project, it's not the case that you are a producer looking for scripts. If people submit the script to you, it's because they're the producer, they own it, and this is the project that they're looking to fund. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. The other thing I was going to ask is, usually you mentioned that people should register their work at copyright.gov.
Yep.
Not the WGA, et cetera, et cetera. If they're going to protect their screenplay, they need to register it with the United States government, which you can reach at copyright.gov. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
And if they don't understand why they have to do that, then they may need to look at, they could ask ChatGPT, which is what everybody does for everything these days, or they can reach out to an attorney to find out what copyright does. If you really don't understand copyright, you can visit if you go to my website and you click on my videos, I have an entertainment attorney talking about copyright and why it's the most powerful form of intellectual property protection available inside the United States, why it is so critical for people that are producing a film to be able to register their copyright so they can produce it and protect the revenue that they generate from it.
And we actually can't even take a submission without the copyright proof. So that's to protect the client, to protect us, just all around. It's good business practice.
Right. And you can't really so when you're a producer, you need to understand intellectual property rights like copyright and other rules as well. You need to learn those rules because what you're selling when you sell a film, when you license a film, what you're selling is intellectual property. So you need to make sure you really do have to understand copyright and you have to understand the rules that govern work for hire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, just so you can do business safely in Hollywood. If you don't understand those things, one of the other things when you work with Ray and you're starting to put together a package that you're going to take to investors or you're going to take to banks or you're going to get funded, one of the things you're doing is you're creating a bundle of documents that prove that you own the intellectual property that they're about to be investing in. Because an investor has invested in a script that a producer doesn't own, it tends to make them very cranky because they tend to lose their money on it when the film's released. So if you have any questions, I hope that you'll reach out to me at nancyfultonmeetups.com. If you signed up for this event, you'll get a link to an email that lets you rewatch the video for free. If you want to, you can also reach out, obviously, to all of the contact information that's been distributed via the chat. And we'll be doing more events going forward. I do events all the time. You can find a whole bunch of them by going to nancyfultonmeetups.com and clicking on the video link. I have 120 workshops online, and they cover everything from work for hire and copyright law to how to read a screenplay like a producer and how to write a screenplay in 40 to 80 hours, etc. So when you get a chance, you might check that out. Cool. Thank you guys very much for taking the time to come tonight. The conversations are always so interesting, and I also think that they're very 2025 as opposed to like the media that the way filmmaking is actually happening, not the way it used to happen in the old days. Because I always like it when people talk about social media marketing and stuff as if it's just been invented. And it's been here for a while, and some people are really good at it, and it's really key to your success. So I think this was an important event for that, from that perspective, because Ash has a lot to say and a lot to shows them many ways that social media marketing and being able to have direct contact with your audience before a film is made is an incredibly powerful thing. It can make you a success right from the very start. So, all right, you guys, thank you very much and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.